When I pulled into my driveway and saw the under contract sign in front of my $610,000 home, I thought it was a mistake, until I found my 8-year-old daughter standing outside in 29-degree cold for nearly 4 hours because my own mother had sold my house using a power of attorney she was never allowed to use, told my child she was now homeless, and had already taken a $25,000 deposit behind my back. What she didn't know was that I work in risk compliance, and within 24 hours I would freeze the sale, trigger a fraud investigation, and watch the same legal system she underestimated order her out of my house and into probation. Chapter 1. The Night the Gate Closed. The first thing I saw was the sign. Under contract. White background, red letters, planted crooked in the frozen grass of my front yard like it had grown there overnight. I remember thinking it had to be a mistake. Maybe the neighbors were selling and the wind carried the sign over. Maybe I was more exhausted than I thought after 3 days in Chicago reviewing compliance reports that no one wanted to read, but everyone was afraid of failing. Then I saw Ivy. She was standing just inside the gate, hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat, shoulders hunched up to her ears. The sky had already turned that dull blue-gray that means the sun is done trying. My dashboard read 29 degrees. January in Naperville does not forgive. I slammed the car into park and ran. Her cheeks were pink, not the soft kind from playing outside, but the stiff kind that come from waiting too long. Her nose was red. There were dried tear tracks on one side of her face, frozen into the skin. "Baby, how long have you been out here?" She looked at me like I had just come back from the grocery store. "Around 4 hours, I think. Grandma said I couldn't come inside because the house isn't ours anymore." 4 hours. My throat tightened so hard it felt mechanical. "What time did Dad drop you off?" She shrugged. "After lunch. Grandma opened the door. He waved and left." I pressed my hand against her cheek. Cold. Not dangerously cold yet, but cold enough that it left an imprint on me. "Why didn't you call me?" "Grandma said not to. She said I had to understand that things change." Things change. I stood up slowly and looked at my house. The windows were lit. Through the front window I could see movement. Shadows crossing the living room I painted myself in the summer of 2019. I walked to the front door and tried my key. It worked. The smell hit me first. Cardboard and packing tape. My mother, Margot, was standing near the staircase holding a roll of bubble wrap. My father, Daniel, was sealing a box with a strip of tape, pulling it tight with unnecessary force. My younger sister, Leela, was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, surrounded by half-packed cushions. They all turned at once. "Oh, you're back early," my mother said, like I had interrupted dinner. "Why was my daughter outside for 4 hours?" Margot waved a hand dismissively. "She wasn't outside. She was in the yard. She had a coat." "It is 29 degrees, I said. Daniel set the tape down. "We didn't think it would take you this long to get home." I looked at the boxes, at the framed photos already taken off the wall, at the empty space where my bookshelf used to be. "Why is there a real estate sign in my yard?" Margot straightened her back. "Because we sold the house, Adeline. You cannot keep carrying all of this by yourself. It's too much. It's not practical." I laughed once, quietly. Sold the house. Leela finally looked up. "It's under contract. The buyers are great. Young couple, first-time homeowners." "With what authority?" I asked. Margot's jaw tightened. "With the power you gave me." I stepped closer. "The limited power of attorney I signed in 2021 for medical decisions and school paperwork for Ivy when I travel. It gives me authority to act on your behalf," she said. "For emergencies," I replied. "Does it mention real estate anywhere in that document?" Daniel cut in. "This is ridiculous. We are family. You think we would do something to hurt you?" My eyes drifted back to Ivy, who had followed me in and was standing by the door quietly, still in her coat. I bent down and unzipped it, then took it off and hung it over the chair. Her hands were trembling slightly. Did you tell her she doesn't live here anymore? Margot hesitated. She needs to understand reality. She is 8 years old. She needs to understand that you cannot cling to a house just because you are sentimental. You make good money. You can buy something smaller, something smarter. Leela could use the extra help. Your father's retirement is not what we expected. The words came out of her mouth so cleanly that it almost impressed me. The house I bought in 2018 for $465,000. The house that is now worth over $600,000. The house where I rebuilt my life after my divorce with Graham in 2019, reduced to a sentimental inconvenience. I took a slow breath. In the power of attorney, is there a clause granting authority to transfer, convey, or encumber real property? Margot blinked. You are being dramatic. Is there? Daniel threw up his hands. This is legal nitpicking. We did what was best for the family. I looked at each of them in turn, at the bubble wrap in Margot's hands, at the taped boxes near the stairs, at Leela, who avoided my eyes. Okay, I said. That was it. No yelling, no threats, no tears. Margot frowned. That's all you have to say? Okay. I walked back to Ivy and took her hand. Get your backpack, baby. Where are we going? She asked. We're going to stay somewhere warm tonight. Margot's voice sharpened. Don't be childish. We already signed the contract. You can't undo this because you're upset. I turned at the doorway. We'll see. The hotel off Route 59 had a lobby that smelled like artificial citrus and overworked heating vents. I checked us in without thinking about the cost. $8 for bottled water, the kind of place that pretends to be neutral territory. Ivy ate waffles in the morning, drowning them in syrup. When kids stop being hungry, something is wrong. She was hungry. That mattered. That night, she placed her coat neatly at the foot of the bed. I didn't ask why. I knew. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop and pulled up the scanned copy of the limited power of attorney. I keep everything organized. Compliance does that to you. I read every line. Authority to make medical decisions. Authority to sign school documents. Authority to access educational records. Nothing about selling real estate. Nothing about listing, transferring, or executing deeds. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, just clarity. I dialed Graham first. What time did you drop Ivy off? I asked. Around 2:25. Your mom opened the door. She was right there. Did Ivy look okay when she got out of your car? Yeah, she waved at me. Did Mom say anything? Not really. Why? Is Ivy okay? She's fine. She ate. She's warm. Thank God, he said, and this time it didn't sound automatic. If anyone contacts you about this, my parents, Leela, anyone, do not engage. Just tell me. I won't get involved, he said quickly. That's the smartest thing I've heard him say in years. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I called Thomas Keene. It was late, but I knew he would answer. He handled a regulatory issue for my company 2 years ago and left me his card. Real estate attorney, DuPage County. Thomas, it's Adeline Mercer. I need to know something. Does a limited power of attorney that covers medical and school matters allow someone to sell a house? There was a pause on the other end. Not a confused pause, a careful one. No, he said, unless it explicitly grants authority to convey real property. Why? Because my parents just put my house under contract. Another pause, longer this time. Do not contact them about this, he said calmly. Do not threaten, do not warn. I need a copy of that document and the property information. If there is a real estate sign, there is a realtor, and there is a title company. We can put them on notice that the owner disputes authorization. That usually freezes everything. Freezes everything. Paper has a way of ruining confidence, I said quietly. Yes, it does, he replied. When I ended the call, the room was still. Ivy shifted in her sleep and rolled onto her side. The coat stayed at her feet like a guard. I closed the laptop and looked around the neutral beige walls of the hotel room. This had stopped being a family argument the moment my daughter stood outside in the cold. This had just entered the adult world. and in the adult world, proof matters more than blood. Chapter 2. When Paper Turned Against Blood. I did not sleep much that night. By 6 in the morning, I was sitting at the small round hotel table with my laptop open, a legal pad beside me, and a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Ivy was still asleep, curled on her side, her coat folded neatly at the foot of the bed like a silent witness. I emailed Thomas the scanned copy of the limited power of attorney first. Then I pulled up the closing documents from when I bought the house in 2018. Purchase price $465,000. My signature in blue ink on every page. Deed recorded with DuPage County. Clean chain of title. Thomas called back before 8. "I have reviewed the document," he said. "It grants authority for medical decisions and school-related matters only. There is no language authorizing the transfer, conveyance, or encumbrance of real property. So they cannot legally sell it. Not without exceeding their authority. The key question is whether the title company and buyer relied on that document in good faith. We need to act quickly." I wrote down everything he said. "I need the deed," he continued. "I also need the county recorder information and any listing details if you can get them. Do you know which brokerage is handling the sale?" "I saw a sign from a local firm," I said. "I will drive by and get the name." "Do that. Then I will contact the title company directly. If there is a pending closing, we can put them on notice that the owner disputes the authority used to execute the contract. Once that notice is filed, escrow typically freezes until the dispute is resolved." "How fast can that happen?" "If they take it seriously, within 24 hours. 24 hours felt like the difference between damage and disaster. After Ivy woke up and ate cereal from the hotel breakfast bar, I drove back to the house. The sign in the yard belonged to a brokerage in Naperville. The listing had already been pulled from public view, which meant it was under contract. I sat in my car and called the brokerage office. "I am the owner of the property on South Elmwood Drive," I said. "I need the name of the title company handling the transaction." There was a pause. "One moment, please." A man came on the line. I explained that I had not authorized the sale and that the power of attorney used did not include real estate authority. His tone changed immediately from polite to cautious. "The file is with DuPage Title Services," he said. "Escrow officer is Elena Ruiz." "Thank you." Thomas called Elena within the hour. I was on the line when she joined the call. "Ms. Mercer has informed us that the power of attorney relied upon in this transaction does not grant authority to convey the property," Thomas said evenly. "We are submitting a fraud affidavit and requesting that escrow be frozen pending investigation." Elena did not sound defensive. She sounded alert. "There is a buyer," she said. "Deposit of $25,000 has been placed into escrow. Closing has not yet occurred. If there is a dispute as to authority, we will need documentation immediately." "You will have it within the hour," Thomas replied. I sent over the deed, the POA, and copies of my signature from prior filings. Elena confirmed receipt. "Once we receive formal notice, we will suspend further action on this file until authority is verified," she said. When I hung up, my hands were shaking for the first time. I had never been afraid of paperwork before. It had always felt like armor. Now it felt like a blade, and I wasn't sure which way it would cut. Thomas called again mid-afternoon. "They have frozen the file," he said. "Just like that?" "Yes, escrow is suspended. The buyer cannot close until the authority issue is resolved." I leaned back in the hotel chair and closed my eyes. Within 15 minutes, my phone buzzed. "Daniel?" I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through tight and strained. "They froze the file. The title company says there is a dispute. What did you do?" I deleted the voicemail without responding. Then Leela texted, "Why would you sabotage this? I already signed my lease. My deposit is on the line." I stared at the message for a long time.
"You signed a lease before the house even closed," I typed back. "Mom said it was done," she replied immediately. "She said it was just paperwork." "Paperwork matters," I wrote, and put the phone face down. Thomas called again in the early evening. "There is something else," he said. "I reviewed the signature on the sales documents that were provided to the title company. It does not appear consistent with your recorded signature from 2018. My chest tightened. "Not consistent how?" "Stroke order, pressure, spacing. I'm not a forensic document examiner, but there are enough discrepancies to raise questions. If this escalates, it could trigger a criminal referral for suspected forgery." I felt the room tilt slightly. "Are you saying my mother forged my name?" "I am saying that if the signature was not yours and the authority was exceeded, the legal consequences could extend beyond a voided contract." There was a long silence between us. Then Thomas added something I hadn't considered. "You should understand something, Adeline. If the buyer claims they relied on the document in good faith and incurs damages because of the dispute, litigation could follow. These cases can take 1 to 2 years to fully resolve. It's not automatic, and it's not always clean." For the first time since I saw the sign in the yard, I felt something that was not anger or clarity. Risk. What kind of damages? Inspection costs, appraisal fees, possible claims for lost opportunity. It depends. We'll argue lack of authority, which is strong, but you need to be prepared for complexity. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Do what needs to be done," I said. "I will file the formal fraud affidavit tomorrow morning. That locks the dispute into the record." After I hung up, I called Graham. "I need you to sign an affidavit confirming the time you dropped Ivy off yesterday and that my mother opened the door." He did not hesitate this time. "If that helps you, yes, tell me where to sign." I emailed him a draft that Thomas prepared. He returned it within an hour, signed and notarized through an online service. Professional, detached, clean. I printed everything at the small business center in the hotel lobby. The printer hummed as page after page came out. Deed, POA, signature samples, fraud affidavit, Graham's statement. The stack grew thicker in my hands. When I came back to the room, Ivy was sitting cross-legged on the bed coloring. "Are we moving?" she asked without looking up. "Not today. Grandma said the house is not ours anymore." I sat beside her. Grandma was wrong. She paused, then looked at me directly. "Are you calling real grown-ups about it?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, the kind who believe in evidence." She nodded as if that made sense to her. That night, after she fell asleep, I spread the papers across the desk again. Each document felt like a line in a language my parents had assumed I would never speak against them. My phone buzzed once more. It was another voicemail from Daniel. "You are making this worse than it needs to be. We were trying to help. You always think you know better because of your job." I listened to it twice. Then I turned the phone off completely. In less than 24 hours, the house had shifted from being under contract to being under dispute. For the first time since I walked through that front door and saw boxes stacked against the walls, the balance of power had moved. Not because I yelled, not because I begged, because I put paper in the right hands.
Chapter 3. The cracks beneath their confidence. The next 48 hours did not explode. They tightened. By the second morning, the listing was gone entirely from the brokerage website. The sign disappeared from my yard sometime overnight. I did not see who removed it. I only noticed the empty patch of frozen grass when I drove past on my way to drop off another set of documents at Thomas's office. Thomas called just before noon. "The brokerage has stepped back," he said. "Once a dispute involving authority is raised, they do not want exposure. Liability insurance does not like gray areas." "So they are out?" "For now. The buyer is still technically under contract, but without clear authority, no one wants to move forward." Later that afternoon, I received the notification from the DuPage County Recorder Portal. The transaction had been marked disputed. That word looked small on the screen. It felt enormous in my chest. Daniel called again. "This is getting out of control," he said as soon as I answered. "The realtor says we cannot proceed. They are acting like criminals." "You exceeded your authority," I replied calmly. "The document does not give you the right to sell my house." "You are twisting language," he shot back. "Your mother was protecting your interests." "By leaving my daughter outside in the cold for almost 4 hours?" He went quiet for a second. "She was not in danger. It was 29 degrees. It was not below zero." I hung up. Margot texted an hour later. "You are humiliating us." I did not respond. Instead, I drove to Cynthia Walker's house. She lived 2 doors down from mine and had always been the kind of neighbor who baked too many cookies at Christmas and asked about Ivy's school projects. I knocked. She opened the door with a cautious smile. "I was hoping you might come by," she said. "Did you happen to capture anything on your doorbell camera on Tuesday afternoon?" I asked. Her expression shifted immediately. "I thought that might matter. Yes, I saved it." We stood in her kitchen while she pulled up the footage on her tablet. The timestamp read 2:15. Graham's car pulled up, Ivy stepped out, Margot opened the door halfway, spoke briefly, then closed it again. Ivy stood there. She knocked once, then she waited. The footage rolled forward in sped-up motion. The sun shifted. The shadows lengthened. At 6:07, my car pulled into the driveway. 3 hours and 52 minutes. Cynthia pressed her lips together. "I almost went over there," she said softly, "but I assumed someone was inside and it was a misunderstanding." It was not a misunderstanding. She sent me the file immediately. Thomas reviewed it within the hour. "This is significant," he said. 4 hours at 29 degrees creates measurable risk exposure, especially for a child. It supports a child endangerment report." I closed my eyes. "I do not want to escalate unnecessarily." "You are not escalating," he replied. "You are documenting. If this matter reaches a judge, the full picture matters." "What happens if we file that report?" "It becomes part of the record. It may trigger an investigation. It also strengthens your position that their judgment was compromised." I thought about Ivy's hands trembling when I unzipped her coat. "File it," I said. Thomas handled the paperwork. I did not call the police. I did not knock on my parents' door. I let the system take it in. 2 days later, Leela showed up at the hotel unannounced. She knocked hard. Ivy was in the bathroom brushing her teeth. I opened the door just enough to see her face, flushed and angry. "Are you trying to ruin my life?" she demanded. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. "You signed a lease before the house closed," I said. "Mom said it was done. She said it was just waiting on paperwork." "Paperwork is the house." Her eyes filled with frustrated tears. "My landlord called me. He said my financial backing is unstable. He is canceling the lease. I lose my deposit. Do you know how hard I worked to get approved?" "You should have asked me before relying on something that wasn't yours." "I trusted Mom," she said. "I trusted you too. I thought you would not do this." I looked at her carefully. "Do what?" "Turn it into a legal war." "I did not turn it into anything. I protected my property and my child." She shook her head. "You always think you are smarter than everyone else because of your job." I did not respond to that. She left after a few more angry sentences that sounded rehearsed. That evening, Thomas called again, his voice measured. "There is something you need to understand. The buyer's attorney has reached out. They are asking whether you intend to pursue full litigation or settle." "Settle what?" "If they argue they acted in good faith reliance on the power of attorney and incur losses, they may seek compensation. It does not mean they will win, but it introduces complexity." "How long could this take?" "If it escalates fully, 1 to 2 years is not unrealistic. Litigation is slow and expensive." I felt my stomach tighten. "And the cost?" "Significant. You would be looking at ongoing attorney fees, expert review of signatures, potential depositions." For the first time, the risk was not abstract. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed. "So this could drain me financially?" "It could," Thomas said, but your position is strong. The authority is clearly limited. The signature discrepancies help. Still, you need to be prepared." After I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. The anger I had felt was sharp and focused. This was different. This was heavy. I was not only defending my house, I was gambling time and money on a principle. Ivy came out of the bathroom and climbed onto the bed. "Are we staying here forever?" she asked. "No, we are waiting." "For what?" "For people to read." She frowned slightly. "Grandma says judges don't break families over paperwork." I inhaled slowly. "Judges don't break families. People do." That night, she placed her coat at the foot of the bed again, third night in a row. I noticed she smoothed it flat this time, like she was preparing for another weight. The next week was quiet on the surface. No new voicemails, no angry texts. Silence can feel like strategy. Then Thomas called with an update. "The court has scheduled a hearing in 6 weeks. It will address the validity of the authority used in the sale and the dispute filed with the title company." 6 weeks? Yes, that is relatively fast. I hung up and stared at the calendar on my phone. 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks of hotel bills. 6 weeks of uncertainty. Later that afternoon, I drove by the house again. The lights were on. Through the window, I saw Daniel pacing. Margot stood at the kitchen counter, speaking sharply, her hands moving the way they did when she believed she was absolutely right. Leela's car was parked in the driveway. I imagined the conversations happening inside. "We will fix this. She cannot possibly take this to court. It's just a technicality." For the first time, I sensed something else in that house. Doubt. And for the first time since I saw the sign in my yard, I felt something crack on their side instead of mine. The hearing was on the calendar now. 6 weeks. Enough time for confidence to fracture.
Chapter 4. Inside the courtroom. The 6 weeks passed with the slow grind of something tightening in the background. I moved Ivy back into the house 3 days before the hearing. Thomas advised it. The dispute was officially recorded. The title file remained frozen. Legally, I was still the owner. Physically, my parents were still inside. I did not argue. I did not knock. I let the clock move. On the morning of the hearing, I wore the same navy suit I reserve for board audits, the kind that communicates preparation without drama. Ivy was at school. Graham had agreed to keep her after dismissal if things ran long. The Circuit Court of DuPage County did not look dramatic. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, the low murmur of people waiting for their names to be called. Ordinary room, extraordinary consequences. Margot and Daniel were already seated when I walked in. Lila sat behind them, arms folded tightly across her chest. Margot did not look at me. Daniel did. "This has gone too far," he muttered. I took my seat beside Thomas. The bailiff called the case. We stood. Judge Harold Benton entered with the quiet authority of someone who had seen every version of family conflict. Thomas presented first. He laid out the timeline cleanly. Purchase in 2018, limited power of attorney executed in 2021, scope limited to medical and educational matters, no clause granting authority to transfer real property. He handed up the document. Judge Benton adjusted his glasses and read silently for a moment. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the ventilation system. He looked up. "Mrs. Holt," he said to Margot, "point me to the provision in this document that authorizes you to sell this property." Margot shifted in her seat. "It grants me authority to act on her behalf," she said carefully. "We believed that included making decisions in her best interest." The judge's voice remained even. "I am not asking about belief, I am asking about language. Where is the authority to transfer, convey, or encumber real property?" Margot did not answer. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "We are her parents. We were trying to help." Judge Benton glanced down at the document again. "This instrument authorizes medical decisions and educational matters. It does not authorize the sale of a residence." Thomas stepped forward and submitted the fraud affidavit, along with the doorbell footage timeline and Graham's notarized affidavit confirming the drop-off time. The judge reviewed the materials methodically. 4 hours, he said, almost to himself when he read the timestamp summary. Margot's jaw tightened. "She was in the yard," she said quickly. "She had a coat." "It was 29 degrees that afternoon," Thomas replied. Judge Benton looked directly at Margot. "Do you dispute that the child remained outside for approximately 3 hours and 52 minutes? Margot hesitated. "I did not think it was dangerous." The judge nodded once, then turned back to the documents. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "The court finds that the limited power of attorney did not grant authority to execute a contract for the sale of this residence. The purported transaction is void for lack of authority." The words landed with more weight than I expected. Void. Daniel inhaled sharply. "There must be some way to resolve this within the family. We do not need to escalate this further." Judge Benton looked him directly. "This court does not mediate entitlement." The room went still. Then Thomas addressed the issue of the signature discrepancies. "There are material differences between the recorded signature from 2018 and the signature presented in the sales documents. We are not making a criminal accusation here. We are placing the court on notice." Judge Benton's expression did not change, but his tone shifted slightly. "The matter of potential forgery is not before me for determination today. However, the court will direct that the file be referred to the appropriate authorities for review." Margot's face drained of color. "You cannot be serious," she said under her breath. The judge heard her. "Mrs. Holt, exceeding the scope of a power of attorney and executing documents without proper authority carries consequences. Whether those consequences are civil or criminal is not for this court to decide at this moment. The file will be forwarded." Daniel turned toward me. "Adeline, this is insane. You are turning your own parents into criminals." I met his eyes. I did not raise my voice. "You sold my house." Judge Benton continued. "In addition, the court grants the petition for possession. The respondents are ordered to vacate the property within 30 days. 30 days. Margot sat perfectly still now. For the first time since this began, she did not speak. Lila shifted in her chair behind them. "This is over paperwork," she whispered. Judge Benton looked down at his notes once more. "The law is not paperwork, it is structure. When authority is exceeded, structure responds." He struck the gavel lightly. The hearing was over. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt narrower. Daniel approached Thomas first. "There must be some compromise, a payment plan, something." Thomas remained composed. "The transaction is void. The possession order stands. Any further discussion should go through counsel." Margot finally looked at me. "You always needed to win," she said quietly. "This is not about winning," I replied. "It is about ownership." She held my gaze for a moment, then looked away. Lila stepped closer, her voice tight. "You are really going to let them send this to a prosecutor?" I did not answer immediately. "The file has already been referred," I said. She exhaled sharply and walked away. Thomas and I exited the building together. "You handled that well," he said. I did not feel like I had handled anything. I felt like I had stood still while the system moved around me. "What happens now?" I asked. "The possession order is effective immediately, but they have 30 days to vacate voluntarily. If they do not, we proceed with eviction enforcement. As for the referral, that depends on what the state's attorney's office decides after reviewing the file." "And the buyer?" "The buyer's counsel has already indicated they will not pursue damages given the clear lack of authority. They would rather walk away than litigate against a void contract." A breath I had not realized I was holding finally left my body. "So the house is legally mine again." "It never stopped being yours," Thomas said. "It just required confirmation." As I walked down the courthouse steps, the winter air felt different than it had 6 weeks ago. Not warmer, just clearer. I pulled out my phone and saw 3 missed calls from Daniel. I did not return them. Instead, I drove past the house one more time. Margot's car was still in the driveway, so was Lila's. Through the front window, I could see movement. Boxes had been reopened, some were repacked. 30 days. For the first time since I had seen the sign in the yard, I understood something. Confidence does not shatter loudly. Sometimes it simply goes quiet.
Chapter 5. The day the house was taken back. 30 days passed more slowly than the 6 weeks before court. Margot and Daniel did not leave voluntarily. Thomas filed for enforcement the morning after the deadline expired. The sheriff's office scheduled the eviction for early March. 90 days after the original dispute was recorded, Deputy Marcus Reed knocked on my door to confirm I would be present. "You understand this is procedural," he said. "We keep it calm. We document everything. They have notice." I nodded. I had learned the rhythm of legal language by then. Calm, procedural, notice. The morning of the eviction was cold but clear, the kind of Midwestern sky that looks almost polished. I asked Graham to keep Ivy overnight so she would not see any of it. He agreed without argument. When the sheriff's vehicle pulled into the driveway, 2 neighbors stepped outside under the pretense of checking their mail. Word travels in suburban neighborhoods without anyone needing to raise their voice. Deputy Reed approached the front door and knocked firmly. Margot opened it. For a moment, I saw the version of her I had grown up with. Perfect posture, hair set, expression controlled. Then she saw the deputy behind her. "This is unnecessary," she said sharply. "Ma'am, the court has issued a possession order," he replied evenly. "You have had notice. We are here to execute it." Daniel appeared behind her. "We are still exploring legal options," he said. "You may pursue whatever remedies you believe you have," Deputy Reed answered. "Today, you need to vacate." There was no shouting, no dramatic collapse, just the sound of something final. Lila stood at the base of the staircase, arms wrapped around herself. "You are actually doing this," she said to me quietly. I met her gaze. It was not my decision after the hearing. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Can you at least talk to the prosecutor? Tell them to drop the criminal referral. The file is not in my hands anymore. You started it. I documented it." Her eyes flashed. "Mom says the prosecutor is considering felony charges if they push the forgery angle." I held her stare. "Then maybe your lawyer should advise her carefully." They did hire a lawyer, a local defense attorney with a polished website and reassuring headshots. I knew because Daniel had left a voicemail 3 nights earlier. "Our counsel says this could escalate if we do not cooperate," he had said. "There is talk of felony exposure. We need to discuss." Thomas had explained it to me the day after. If the state can establish intentional forgery and financial gain, it could rise to felony level, he said. More likely, the state's attorney will offer a plea to a misdemeanor to avoid trial. That depends on their assessment of evidence. What would that look like? Probation, fine, criminal record. Margot and Daniel were not prepared for criminal record to be part of their vocabulary. Inside the house, boxes were stacked near the door again, this time not in anticipation of a closing, but of departure. Deputy Reed supervised as they carried out the last of their belongings. No one cried, no one apologized. Lila paused near the doorway. "I lost my apartment because of this," she said flatly. "My landlord kept my deposit." "You signed based on something that was not final," I replied. She shook her head. "You always talk like a contract." "Maybe that is because contracts matter." Margot walked past me without speaking. Daniel followed, eyes fixed ahead. Within 2 hours, the house was empty. Deputy Reed handed me the final paperwork. "Possession returned to owner," he said. "Change the locks today." I stood alone in the living room after they left. The silence felt different from the courtroom silence. This one was domestic, personal. Later that week, the prosecutor's office made its decision. Thomas called me mid-afternoon. "They have reviewed the file. The state's attorney intends to pursue charges. However, they are willing to offer a plea." "What kind?"
misdemeanor fraud, 18 months probation, $15,000 fine, restitution of certain fees, no contact order with Ivy. I leaned back in my office chair. And if they refuse? The evidence on signature discrepancies and exceeding authority is strong. Their defense counsel has likely advised them that trial carries risk of a felony conviction. Daniel called me that night. "Our lawyer says we should accept the plea," he said, his voice lower than I had ever heard him. "That is between you and your lawyer. Adeline, this is going to follow us. You made that decision when you signed my name." There was a long pause. "Your mother never thought it would go this far." It went exactly as far as it had to. They accepted the plea 2 weeks later. 18 months probation, $15,000 fine, mandatory financial counseling, and a no-contact order prohibiting any direct or indirect communication with Ivy. The no-contact order was what unsettled Margot the most. She tried to call Ivy the evening the order was entered. I was in the kitchen when my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I did not answer. A moment later, a text from Daniel arrived. "Your mother just wanted to say goodnight." "The order is active," I replied. "Do not contact her." Seconds later, another call came in. I let it ring. That was the last attempt. The financial consequences came next. Thomas informed me that their defense fees were estimated to $72,000. To cover costs and fines, Margot and Daniel listed their vacation property in Florida, a small house near Sarasota that they had always described as their reward for decades of hard work. It sold within a month. Lila moved into a smaller apartment across town after taking on additional shifts at work to manage her $38,000 credit card balance and lost deposit. Karma rarely announces itself. It settles in quietly through bank statements and court dates. The night after the locks were changed, I brought Ivy home. She stood in the doorway of her bedroom for a long moment. Everything was where she had left it: the bookshelf, the desk, the pale blue walls. She walked in slowly and touched the edge of her bed. "Is it really ours again?" she asked. "It never stopped being ours." She nodded. That night, she climbed into bed without placing her coat at the foot. She folded it once and hung it back in the closet. I stood in the hallway watching the door close gently behind her. For the first time since January, the house felt like structure again. Not sentiment, not entitlement. Structure.
Chapter 6. 3 months later, the house no longer felt like a battleground. It felt lived in again. Spring had softened the edges of winter. The trees along South Elmwood Drive were beginning to fill out, green replacing the brittle gray that had framed everything in January. Ivy's laughter drifted through open windows in the afternoon when she played with the girl from 2 houses down. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds, the kind you only notice after you have almost lost them. Ivy completed her 6th session with Dr. Melissa Grant on a Wednesday afternoon. I waited in the small reception area, flipping through a parenting magazine I was not actually reading. When the door opened, Ivy walked out holding a small drawing, a house with a bright blue door and a large yellow sun overhead. Dr. Grant followed behind her. "She is doing well," she told me. "There was fear, but it did not settle into something deeper. The consistency you provided mattered." Consistency. That word again. Ivy climbed into the car and buckled herself in. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "We can get ice cream," I said. That night, I watched her go through her bedtime routine. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and walked into her room without glancing at the closet. Her coat hung neatly on its hook. She opened the closet, took it down, folded it once carefully, and placed it on the top shelf instead of near the bed. I did not say anything. I just stood in the doorway and watched. It was a small gesture, almost invisible, but it marked something finishing. At work, things had shifted too. 2 weeks after the plea agreement was finalized, my supervisor called me into his office. "We are launching a major internal audit next quarter," he said. "Multi-state exposure, regulatory risk. I need someone who does not panic under pressure." He did not mention my personal situation. He did not need to. "You handled that issue with your property quietly and efficiently," he added. "That kind of composure is rare." I accepted the assignment. Compliance is not glamorous. It is slow and meticulous and often thankless. But it is built on the same foundation that carried me through the past few months: documentation, authority, boundaries. Margot and Daniel began their probation quietly. Thomas sent me confirmation of the formal plea filing and the no-contact order terms: 18 months probation, $15,000 fine, financial counseling sessions required, no direct or indirect contact with Ivy. They complied. Daniel sent one email to Thomas asking whether birthday cards could be mailed through a third party. The answer was no. After that, there was silence. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the Florida property sold below asking price because they needed liquidity quickly. $72,000 in defense fees had a way of rearranging retirement plans. Lila moved into a smaller apartment across town. She picked up extra shifts at the medical equipment company where she worked in sales. I saw her once at a grocery store. We stood in the same aisle for a moment, neither of us reaching for anything. She looked tired. "This was not how I pictured 34, she said quietly. I did not answer with sympathy or cruelty. "This is how choices look when they finish unfolding," I said. She nodded once and walked away. There was no reconciliation, no dramatic apology, no scene where someone broke down and asked for forgiveness. Life did not pause for that kind of resolution. One evening in late April, Ivy and I sat on the back porch while the sun went down. She swung her legs over the edge of the steps, tracing patterns in the concrete with the tip of her sneaker. "Mom," she said after a long silence. "Yes?" "Do you hate Grandma?" The question was simple, direct. It landed harder than anything said in court. I considered the answer carefully. "No," I said finally. "I do not hate her." Ivy turned to look at me. "Then why did you make her leave?" I held her gaze. "Because loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you, and it doesn't mean letting them hurt you." She looked down at her shoes again. "Grandma said you care more about rules than people." "Rules protect people," I replied. "Without them, whoever is strongest decides everything." She thought about that for a moment. "Are we strong?" she asked. "We are prepared," I said. That seemed to satisfy her. The house no longer felt fragile. The locks were changed. The deed remained in my name. The court files sat archived, but accessible if ever needed again. Sometimes at night I would stand in the hallway outside Ivy's room and listen to her breathing, not because I was afraid she would be gone, but because I remembered what it felt like to see her standing in the cold, believing she had been displaced. That memory did not soften. It settled. Margot never attempted contact again. The no-contact order held. Daniel complied with probation requirements. Their world contracted slightly around the consequences of their choices. Mine expanded. In June, when the audit project launched, I led the first meeting with a steady voice. Risk assessment, exposure mapping, internal controls, structure. At home, Ivy invited friends over for a sleepover. I ordered pizza. The girls stayed up too late laughing. When I checked on them, her coat was still in the closet. 3 months earlier, I thought justice would feel like victory. It did not. It felt like stability, like the return of something that had always belonged to us. I did not destroy my parents. I refused to let them dismantle me. If you were in my position, standing in your driveway and seeing a sign that should never have been there, watching your child shiver because someone decided entitlement outranked ownership, what would you choose? Blood or accountability?